When I discuss my ideal vision of Path of Exile 2, many people say, "Hey, Tribe, I think it sounds like you just want to play Ruthless in Path of Exile 1. Why don't you go play that?" And an even smaller set of people say, "Hey, it sounds like we just need Ruthless in Path of Exile 2. That would solve all of your problems." So I'd like to quickly define what Ruthless is and why I think this is an unfortunate and terrible solution to the issue that we've been talking about during this extreme stalling downtime season for Path of Exile 2. In Path of Exile 1, Ruthless Mode was implemented several years ago as a response to people who saw a different way to play Path of Exile 1, a game that was more to its actual roots rather than what it had become, which is a one-click button loot fiesta farming simulator. That's honestly what Path of Exile 1 devolves into, or evolves into, depending on your perspective, quite quickly. Chris Wilson, former game director on Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2, co-founder of GGG, was the engineer behind this alongside a couple of PoE 1 developers. In Ruthless, which is a completely separate game mode from the base Path of Exile 1, separate from SSF, Hardcore, so on and so forth, essentially creates extreme loot scarcity. That is the biggest, sell for it to many people. That's the big thing that it does. It removes a lot of loot from the game. Drops are way more valuable. However, in addition to that, it also changes fundamental mechanics around Path of Exile 1, including support gems being drop only. All support gems being drop only, which is kind of crazy. They also have changes to ascendancies and league mechanics and the end game and many other things. It's essentially a toned down version of Path of Exile 1. And in it, you can get just as ridiculous as you do in the core Path of Exile 1, but it takes a lot longer. The progression is a lot slower, and you rely more on the loot that you find, and that loot is far less in quantity, okay? So a lot of people kind of say, okay, it sounds like you want to play this. Well, one, I think I would like the less loot, making loot more valuable from Ruthless in Path of Exile 1. However, all the other system changes, not a fan of, including support gems being drop only. That sounds terrible, and I'd have to relearn all the league mechanics and ascendancy. Don't want that. Don't want a completely separate game. I not a fan. And then people, as I discussed, the want for more engaging combat, for less loot on the screen, for more meaningful progression, basically say, ha, we need Ruthless in Path of Exile 2. However, I think the whole point of Path of Exile 2 was kind of a big boop reset button for Path of Exile 1. Okay, let's imagine that they are supposed to be very similar in terms of gameplay at the end of the day. Still, Path of Exile 2 should be a big reset button from the power creep of Path of Exile 1, okay? So you shouldn't be able to have these extreme amounts of power this quickly. Players shouldn't be trivializing content, deleting bosses in 3 seconds, including brand new bosses that they've never seen before. That's ridiculous. That sucks. But that is what Path of Exile 2 has become. It's already become the one-click button, explode everything. Packs, bosses, cluttering the screen, all this sort of stuff. Loot explosions everywhere, okay? With loot filters, many of us are deleting 95% of the items off our screen. Path of Exile 2 was supposed to be a reset. Path of Exile 2 shouldn't need a Ruthless mode. Path of Exile 2 isn't in full release yet. Path of Exile 2 just has 1 year of updates to his name, and the power creep is already on the same par as a Path of Exile 1. It's going in the same direction as a Diablo 3. Game is in its infancy. Don't think Path of Exile 2 needs a Ruthless mode. Path of Exile 2 needed to tone in player power far quicker. It needed to be more aggressive with the amount of loot it was destroying off the ground. It needed to embrace the difficulty and the slower paced ARPG that it was setting out to be. It needed to not actually take as much inspiration from its predecessor, Path of Exile 1, in terms of its gameplay speed and in terms of the type of combat it had. I think it needed to take more inspiration from your classic ARPGs. This is going to sound incredibly stupid. I think it needed more inspiration from Diablo 1. Okay, Diablo 1 is like a dungeon crawler, okay? Far slower paced than what we see in the modern day. Slower than Diablo 2, but I think Path of Exile 2, with its insane variety of enemies, over 400, 500 monster types in the game, it's awesome boss fights, it's beautiful art, visual effects, many different ways you can build your character. Can you imagine it being mostly a dungeon crawler all throughout the game? And instead of becoming a one-click button loot fiesta, where you're just trying to kill pinatas and get all their items and feel the tinks on your screen, that it was more of an engaging experience where you're looking at the monsters, the variety of the monster packs in maps. You have all these hundreds of monsters to choose from, fighting these bosses, interacting with your skills in all these different ways. They flow together so beautifully. Yes, there were so many problems and are so many problems with Path of Exile 2, but instead of really pushing in that direction, the more dungeon crawler-esque, I finally found the way to describe it. It's not Souls-like what I'm looking for. I'm looking for like a dungeon crawler, a classic dungeon crawler where you are crawling. Maybe not crawling. Maybe people don't like that word. But you are steadily progressing through a dungeon, through an area, fighting lots of different monsters. Maybe you got a pack of 20 monsters. 18 of them are white monsters, normal monsters. One is a magic monster, a little tougher, and then one is rare and it has special attacks that aren't just does fire damage, causes fire explosions on that, but attacks that you actually need to pay attention to. And you have 15 of these combats throughout the area, and each pack drops something meaningful, and it culminates in this huge fight with an epic boss, of which we have many in Path of Exile 2, in which you're needing to dodge roll and you're needing to use certain abilities to get through its break bar and all the rest. Oh, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for, and I think that's what Path of Exile 2 could have been. Maybe it still can be. But I really don't think the answer is implementing a whole different game mode called Ruthless, when the base game should have a lot of this implemented. Make it stand out from the pack, from all the other RPGs. I want the challenge. I want that challenge. I want that engagement. And I know lots of you hate that, and I know lots of you really want it too. And I really think the people who want the difficulty, the friction, the real different feeling, that dungeon crawler-esque experience that, I'm thinking to literally classic dungeon crawlers and D&D and Shadow Dark and all that, like Dungeons and Dragons Online almost, and Diablo 1. That's what I think would have been so awesome to see modernized here with Path of Exile 2, but I don't think it's going to happen. But that doesn't mean I can't talk about it, share these discussions with all of you. They've been incredibly fun, and lots of people are passionate about this, which, is always great to see.